Very few cases I've looked into fill me with a deeper sadness than those where a child suddenly disappears off the face of the earth. It is overwhelmingly heinous when the life of a child ends suddenly, but I can only imagine it's a whole other feeling altogether to never know what has happened to your son or daughter. Many of these cases occur every year, and many still have yet to be solved. One such case is that of Gina Dawn Brooks. Gina Dawn Brooks was born November 28, 1974, to her mother, Cindy Box. I couldn't find much about the other members of her family, but I do know, based upon what is known about the case, that she isn't an only child. She grew up in the quiet town of Fredericktown, one that just has over 3,000 residents and is settled in the northeastern foothills of the St. Francois Mountains. The air of peace and safety in this quiet town turned into one of fear and unease the night of August 5th, 1989. The night started like any normal one for Gina. The blonde-haired, green-eyed 13-year-old girl had just finished watching her brother's baseball game at the local field dressed in a blue striped top, white shorts, and sneakers. After the game ended at around 10 p.m., she walked home on Marshall Street. After saying goodnight to her mother, who had gone to bed soon after, she told her brother she was going on a bike ride to talk to her boyfriend, TJ Kennedy. At around 10:30 p.m., Gina got on the bike she had borrowed from a friend and took off. This is the timeline of events per the subsequent police investigation. Gina had ridden her bike up to the First Baptist Church located off of East College Avenue, getting off of it and beginning to walk towards Kennedy's home. At that point, witnesses stated that they saw a battered station wagon with Missouri license plates following Gina. There isn't a definitive color for this station wagon, but the Charlie Project website states that it is either light gray, green, or blue. The vehicle tailed her up to High Street before the unknown occupants pulled up beside her, snatched her up off her bike, and sped off. Unnamed witnesses state that they then heard a scream and the sound of screeching tires, others stating they saw the vehicle turn left onto Franklin Street. TJ Kennedy and his friend, Chad Morgan, had also caught sight of this vehicle as it sped off as they had been sitting on the front porch of Kennedy's home. They reported hearing Gina cry TJ help from the back of the vehicle as it took off towards Highway 67, never to be seen again. Police were notified about an abandoned bike left by a tree on High Street around the same time as Gina's disappearance, but since there was no sign of any sort of crime occurring there, the bike was taken to the police yard. At around 1 a.m. the next morning, Cindy woke to find her son was awake playing video games, but could not find Gina. When she was told Gina had gone out and noted she had not come back, the police were notified. Assistant Police Chief Lieutenant Keith Despain, who had also responded to the call about the abandoned bike, was working the overnight shift when Cindy filed a missing persons report around 2 a.m. It didn't take him long to realize that the two calls were connected, and he contacted the local hospital to confirm Gina was not there. Once he got that confirmation, the search for Gina began. The local firehouse became the station of operations by Monday morning on August 7th, the place being packed with law enforcement officers up to the state level on top of 60 additional volunteers. Missing person posters went up, candlelit vigils and marches occurred, and yellow ribbons were hung from trees in support of the search. They investigated every lead given, including one that came from northern Canada where the Royal Canadian Mounted Police were contacted. They even drained an entire quarry at a psychic's behest because they said Gina would be found at the bottom of it. Unfortunately, none of these leads panned out, and after a few weeks, the search and all leads stopped coming in. But Lieutenant Despain never gave up hope that they would find Gina, and for a brief moment, it seemed like there might be some sort of justice for her. Nearly 20 years after her disappearance, a letter was found by St. Louis Homicide Unit Commander David Heath from the mother of another missing child, Laura Michelle Dinwiddie. The letter asked Heath to never forget the case, but it was soon turned over to Detective Chris Pappas, who had come across this new set of leads. Detective Pappas would discover that one informant seemed rather suspicious. Then 14-year-old Nathan Danny Williams. Williams had pointed the finger at a friend for the Dinwiddie case, but would then proceed to become a serial sex offender. His first arrest came in 1979 with the rape of a 13-year-old girl. His second coming 10 years later in 1989 when he raped and sodomized a 10-year-old girl. For both crimes, he would be put behind bars for life and eventually be tied to the murder of Dinwiddie. Okay, but what does this have to do with Gina, Madam Hellfire, you must be asking? I'm glad you asked. It's because of a little tape made by the FBI that was distributed to prisoners in the Missouri Department of Corrections. You see, inmates don't much like people who prey upon children, and eventually 2 names were given to investigators, Brian Squires and Timothy Bello. Let's start with why Squires is important. Squires was best friends with Williams, and both men, along with Williams' brother, would frequent the area near Gina's home. Before Squires died of cancer in 1996, he made a deathbed confession to 2 nurses, stating that he and Williams were involved in Gina's abduction and murder, along with a few other cases that have yet to be confirmed. Squires stated that he and Williams held Gina in the back seat of the vehicle and killed her, a vehicle Bello was driving. Bello was interrogated by law enforcement and continued to change his story when asked about Gina's disappearance, initially claiming that her body was buried in an abandoned meat freezer on his father's 96-acre property. He eventually admitted to lying to FBI agents and would be charged for it, the murder charge being dropped for lack of evidence. He was eventually tried for this crime, pleaded guilty, and was sentenced to 30 months in prison, though this sentence would be extended by 5 years as Bello would be convicted of the sexual assault of a 7-year-old in 1990. Boy, these guys are just keepers, aren't they? Since Williams had been brought up multiple times by both Bello and Squires, investigators brought him in for a lie detector test that he promptly failed in epic fashion. The last little detail that made investigators believe he was involved in Gina's disappearance was the fact the 1989 case he had been convicted of occurred just 1 month after she went missing. Investigators believe that the 3 men abducted Gina, raped her in the back of the van, slit her throat when they were done with her, and then disposed of her body in an unknown manner. By 1998, Williams was charged with Gina's murder along with the murder of Dinwiddie and was the lead suspect in the 1979 disappearance of 12-year-old Tammy Surdam. Sadly, none of these charges would stick. In 1999, 10 days before the trial began, the Dinwiddie murder charges would be dropped due to lack of evidence. Tammy's case would never get to the point of being tried as there is no hard evidence for Williams' involvement either. In 2003, the first-degree murder charge against Williams in Gina's case was dropped due to lack of evidence once again. Madison County prosecuting attorney Dwight Robbins would speak about the reason for this in detail. I'm of the firm opinion the state should not proceed to trial and risk the possibility of acquittal, thereby losing any chance of retrying the case should further evidence become available. The offense alleged is so egregious and the consequences of conviction so great that the prosecution should proceed only when the evidence is sufficient to ensure the likelihood of a conviction. At this time, 30 years later, Williams sits in Jefferson City Prison and is not eligible for parole until 2039. Gina's body has never been found. I still hope that someone might come forward with information, but as each year goes by, it just seems like it gets harder, Cindy would later tell 2022 KMOV. Here is what Gina would look like now, at 47 years old, if she is still alive. If you have any information about the disappearance of Gina Dawn Brooks, or have possibly seen her, please use tips.fbi.gov or contact the Madison County Sheriff's Office at 573-783-2234. I wanted to take this time to thank my Patreons and channel members. Your support is so greatly appreciated and I can't thank you enough. If you'd like to become a Patreon, there is a link in the description below, and if you'd like to become a channel member, just go ahead and click that join button and join the Truth Sleuths and Horror Hounds. All channel members and Patreons receive 24-hour access to videos prior to their public release and exclusive updates on my progress. After a certain tier, you can request that I do a certain topic or movie review, or you can even request that I do a game live stream, whichever works for you. At the highest tier, you not only get to choose the topic in which I cover, you get to either co-host the stream or the video that I do that covers said topic, no matter if it's one or multiple. Of course, this is not obligatory. If you want to support the channel, I greatly appreciate it, and once again, thank you so much.